Welcome everybody to this brief presentation on one aspect of the Learner Agency project. Now the Learner Agency project is designed to update our literacy and numeracy provision so that it's at the cutting edge, so it's the very best it can be to prepare adults for the future workplace. Now a recent review of the research about the changing nature of workplaces shows us that the one thing we know for sure is that change is going to continue to be the defining characteristic of workplaces. Artificial intelligence, automation, globalization, changing economics, demographics are changing the nature of the workplace, and it means that people working are going to need to continue to learn things throughout their lives and also solve problems that they've never come across in their lives before. In this particular presentation, we're going to have a look at an initiative we're taking to help learners to solve problems that they've never encountered before. Now, to support adults to solve problems that they've never solved before, first we need to know a little bit about how they currently solve problems that they've never encountered before. Well, my research from the last few years in the New Zealand literacy and numeracy environment showed that a lot of learners, the majority of learners, when confronted with a problem that they didn't know how to solve, would take a very passive response to it, and they would disengage and seek help. For example, let's take Nikki when she's confronted with a fractions problem that she's never seen before. But I didn't learn this in school. And what Nikki means there is that she hasn't been taught the appropriate skill set to solve this problem. So Nikki's next approach is to wait, to ask the tutor for help, to get some friends to help. But what Nikki doesn't do is Nikki doesn't take the initiative and begin to explore that problem herself and make sense of it herself. So we want to provide Nikki and people like Nikki with the impetus, with the skills to know what to do when they don't know what to do. That's what we're going to have a look at in this particular presentation. Okay, to help people know what to do when they don't know what to do, let's take a quick whirlwind tour of some of the research that can inform what we're doing here. Number one, just out of interest's sake, is the Kohler experiments. So Kohler in the 1920s had two chimpanzees, Grande and Sultan, and he would put bananas around the cage that they were in or outside the cage, provide them with some tools, and then see how clever they were at getting the banana. Now, Grande was able to take 3 boxes that were scattered inside the cage, pile them on top of each other to get on top and reach a banana that was hanging from the roof. Now, that might seem pretty common sense to you, but to Grande, it's quite a breakthrough because Grande has never seen boxes put on top of each other again. So it's a novel solution. It's like pretty amazing when you think about it. That little guy in the picture that you can see there is Sultan. And Sultan was the chimpanzee that put 2 sticks together to reach through the cage to reach a banana and pull it out. Quite clever. Now, as clever as chimpanzees are, human beings are even cleverer. We are geniuses. But the amazing thing is that we tend to fall into these fairly predictable traps that prevent us from solving problems. So let's have a quick look at what a couple of these traps are, and then we can work out how to overcome these. The first one is functional fixedness. And this is the idea that when humans begin using a tool and they use it all the time, they tend to think of that tool as only doing that thing. So for example, there was an experiment where there was a rope here and a rope out of reach over here, and the idea was you had to tie these 2 ropes together, but you couldn't hold one and reach the other one, and there were a pair of pliers sitting on a table in front of you. Now, a lot of people were confused by this and they weren't sure how to use the pliers because they tend to think of the pliers as a pair of pliers, as a tool to do something. But the way to solve this problem is to tie the pliers to the bottom of one rope, give it a swing, grab the other one, and then when it swings back, tie them together. Now, you'd be surprised that most people weren't able to solve this problem. And that's because they don't think of the pliers as a counterweight or as a weight, but rather just think of it as a tool. So people tend to think very one-dimensionally about the objects in their environment rather than thinking about using them for different purposes. Number 2, suspension of sensemaking. Here's a classic one. 26 sheep on a boat and 10 goats. How old is the captain? They give this to children, and amazingly, most children answer it with a number. They just add the numbers together. But what they're doing is they're kind of thinking the question really makes no sense, but really all they want is the maths answer, so I'll just give the maths answer. And it means that they're dividing between a maths world and the real world, and they're deciding that the context doesn't really matter. And that has a whole lot of ramifications for people as time goes on. Just to be a bit silly, but here's an example of a problem that Hong Kong children apparently could solve, much to the displeasure of adults, but adults struggled with. And the idea is to try to find the number that's underneath the car there. Now, of course, you'll be falling into the same problem if you try to solve this algebraically. So you're looking for a connection between the 6 and the 16 and so on. But in fact, that's just a distractor. If you flip it upside down, you can see that you've been looking at it upside down and the numbers are just sequential. Now, this is a little bit a result of the suspension of sense making, in that you didn't think about a real parking lot. You probably just thought about algebraic numbers, so you fell into that same trap as well, and so did the rest of the world, don't worry. But it's also a mental sets problem, I think, in that you begin to impose your own rules on the particular problem and think it's going to be solved a certain way. Here's another mental sets problem. This is the 3x3 square, and the idea is you have to join all the dots, using only 4 straight lines without taking your pencil off the page. You might have done this if you've ever been to a problem-solving course or something, and the idea is, in most courses, you have to think outside the square. But the truth is, the answer is you have to draw the lines outside of the square to solve it. And most people don't do it if they've never seen this problem before, because you impose kind of a rule system on yourself about how it should be solved. Human beings also fall into this mental sets problem. So we've got functional fixedness, suspension of sense making, mental sets. The fourth thing is that expert problem solvers know what to do when they don't know what to do. So they have sort of a system for figuring things out. So to give you an example, this is a map of how a couple of learners, expert problem solvers, solved a number word problem that was given to them. You can see that overall they had 20 minutes. They spent a short amount of time reading the problem, and then they jumped into analysis for a while, and then they planned and implemented sort of in an integrated way, and then tried to verify what they were doing. Is what we've done correct? And clearly it wasn't correct, and they jumped back up into analysis, exploring, and went through that process again. And you can see that they've gone through specific steps and spent time doing things. Well, let me show you an example of a New Zealand learner in my research in a typical New Zealand embedded literacy and numeracy course. You can see that here they read the question briefly, and then they just set about exploring, doing the same thing until the time runs out at the end, at which point they're unsuccessful. In short, adults, particularly lower skilled adults, don't know what to do when they don't know what to do. And so we want to develop those skills. We want to give them the skills when you don't know what to do, because that's going to be the environment in the future workplace. Here's a set of strategies for applying to the situation. So that's what we're going to have a look at next. Okay, so knowing what to do when you don't know what to do. First of all, the idea is to give learners problems that they don't know how to solve or have never encountered before. Now, I did a quick survey with some tutors this year and asked them whether they thought there was any benefit in giving learners problems that they didn't know how to solve. And over half of the tutors said, no, there's no benefit. This is not correct. There's lots of benefit, because this really is replicating the environment they're going to be in the future. They're going to be facing problems that they don't know how to solve and have no solution strategies for. So the idea is you give them a problem that they don't know how to solve, and then you give them a heuristic, a set of instructions or a set of strategies for knowing what to do. Now, a heuristic differs from an algorithm. An algorithm is a set of instructions that tells you how to do things. So, for example, if you had 113 plus 113, and you wrote them in an algorithm, 113 plus 113, and you add them in columns, that's an algorithm. If you do that process correctly, you'll get absolutely the right answer. But when you don't have the algorithm and you don't even know how to solve it, then we turn to heuristic and we teach this. Now, there are 4 phases to this particular heuristic. and here they are. The first one is to teach learners how to make sense of the problem, how to understand the problem, and what actions to take when they're doing this. And the idea is that they learn to spend a lot of time gathering information and just understanding the problem. And there's a series of questions they can work through, and they can discuss it in groups, understand the key elements of the problem. Most learners, as we've seen, skip this process, read it once, expect to understand it, and then move on with the other stuff. So that's phase one, understanding the problem. Number two is making a plan. Many learners don't think about making a plan for solving a problem. Usually they just jump into the plan and adapt as they go. But the idea of designing a plan allows you to think about the plan and then to evaluate whether the plan is a good plan or not. Now, the idea is not to leave learners loose, but to give them a set of strategies. So here's a set of strategies that learners can plan to use and think about using. And the idea is they would select particular ones depending on the particular task. Number three, enact the plan. Get going with it. And review the process as you go. So you're putting the plan in place. Step number four, evaluate, verify, check, check, check. You want to check that you're right. Go back and look at your plan, look at the steps in your plan and so on. And if that doesn't work, go back to understand the problem. So it's a process that you teach learners to go through to do this stuff. Now, in summary, this particular process is going to be integrated into our numeracy work in 2020. And we're teaching this as a response to the changing demands of the workplace and the fact that learners need to know what to do when they don't know what to do. But this approach to numeracy and other programs has lots of transfer to different world problems and so on. And I think it's quite exciting and quite a great opportunity for us as practitioners and also for learners to develop a new set of highly applicable skills. So this is one aspect of what we're doing in the Learner Agency project, and there's many more to come. Thanks for watching. See you later.